Hi there everyone, welcome back to Weir Yard here in the loft, and today I'm going to be looking at what's the difference, old versus new, for the Hornby Princess Coronation Class. Now, there's been several iterations of this class over the years, going right back, you could probably trace its lineage right back to the Hornby 00 days. But what I'm most interested in is the brand new up-to-date model, here represented by Duchess of Montrose in the Hornby range. This was introduced earlier this year, 2019, and is the most recent iteration of the model. And I'm going to be comparing it to this particular example, which is Duchess of Abercorn, and this represents the very previous iteration. And I want to know what's really the difference. First up, the initial impression of these two locomotives is that outwardly they both very much capture the classic shape of the Princess Coronation Class, notwithstanding the fact that we have Duchess of Abercorn in her LMS guise as 6234, minus the smoke deflectors, and we have Duchess of Montrose as 46232 in her later BR guise with smoke deflectors. That is something that varied between members of the class. The smoke deflectors were added later on in their life to improve the visibility for the driver. So that is something that does naturally vary between both versions of this model. So we're not going to dwell on that. And there may be some detail differences to do with the livery application, which aren't necessarily a fundamental physical difference. But as you can see, we've got a pretty good representation here of both of these. And you have to ask yourself, just looking at this overview here, why did Hornby feel the need to retool these? Well, there were still a few areas that needed attention. The locomotive itself does appear to have been more of a hybrid of previous versions than an all-new tooling. I'm not entirely sure what the official line from Hornby is, but there were a lot of aspects of the tooling that were perfectly serviceable, and it may well be that as elements of the tooling have come up for needing renewal through regular wear and tear, natural wear and tear of the moulds through usage, that Hornby has taken the opportunity to retool them much, much closer to the prototype. And as modern manufacturing techniques have improved, that is something that has become more and more feasible. Now, I have had a good look over both of these models, and I've found a few obvious detail differences. Well, I say obvious. You have to really go looking for them. And my personal view here is that they are both really good representations. Now, looking over the outside, to me, it isn't really obvious. One of the areas that Hornby has certainly improved over the more recent period is the representation of the coal in the tender. So I'm looking here at the coal load in the tender of the newer model, and it's fairly flat, fairly full. And I'm going to compare that to the coal in the previous iteration. And as you can see, it's chunkier, but somewhat more plastically looking. It doesn't quite sit right. So outwardly, at least, this is the first area where I can conclusively say that there is a noticeable and better difference between the two models. You can see there the coal is a much finer grade and it actually looks more like coal in my eyes. Now, looking down other areas, I think that these these do open. They're very, very fine, and you have to be careful not to damage them, but you can actually open the roof hatch. Let's see what's going on the previous version. They are completely molded shut. It's not a big detraction for me. It has to be said that a lot of these things, you tend to just pose them and leave them. They're not really receptive to repeated handling. So it's not a deal clincher for me, but it is certainly something that I can see there being a difference between the two. Now I'm looking at the back of the tender there, the water fillers and the, I think they're air breathers to allow an equalisation of the pressure when filling and emptying with water. Looks all right to me, but if we go over to the newer model, we can see there's a little bit more detail going on there. It's difficult to see in this light. It's not quite caught the light right, but in my opinion, there is certainly a slightly more finesse and additional detail fixtures in there. Looking further down the tender back, we've got fully sprung buffers on this, the slimline tension lock, vacuum pipes, and some very fine rivet and step detail, and the works plates are reproduced faithfully on there. Moving back over to the previous iteration, again, the back of the tender is pretty good, but those steps look slightly chunkier and there is a distinct absence of that vacuum line, although it may well be that this is a separately fitted, user-fitted detail that I just never got around to doing, so we won't detract from it for that. Now, I'm just looking, yeah, they are sprung buffers, and we've got a slim line in a NEM pocket. Other aspects, it all looks good. Tender axle boxes, they look reasonable with the springs on there, and I'm going to go across and look at this one, and they do seem a little bit finer, and this really is the crux between these two. It's the detail is all there on the previous iteration, but Hornby have taken the opportunity to just go that little bit finer, and this has always been a good seller. It is a locomotive with a great deal of presence, and it has to be said it's probably one of Hornby's flagship models, this and the A4, and they really are working hard to keep ahead of any potential competition. Over the years, some manufacturers have nibbled away at other manufacturers' offerings by tooling up and bringing to market a much higher detailed model. And I think that with these, Hornby feels that it will make these their own. It will not allow another company to kind of beat them to the quality. And it really does show that they have taken so much effort to continuously retool these models, whereas other models have been in manufacturers' ranges for years, if not decades. These get a facelift every few years, and actually the quality of the model does show that attention to detail. Now, to show you some of the rest of the differences I found, I have to now turn the models over on their side so we can look at the bottom. So I'm just going to do that now. So I've taken the opportunity to roll them very carefully on their side. And this, for me, is a lot of the area, the nitty-gritty, where Hornby has put in a lot of effort. The basic outline underneath is fairly much the same, but the tender drawbar, on the older model, we have one that can you can detach the tender, but it's still connected by those wires. And that's always been a big bugbear for me. It's very easy to stress and damage those wires when the tender should accidentally become decoupled from that drawbar. And Hornby have been one of the few manufacturers to take on board that criticism. And on the new model, we have a permanently attached tender drawbar. You can unscrew it. There are some flathead screws there, but it does protect that cable much better. And I really am a great fan of this development. We can also see that we've got the water trough scoop represented on the newer model, which was absent from the older one. So really, it's been an opportunity to kind of just upgrade some of the finer details, as I've said before. Other areas where I've noticed a big difference is the front pony truck. Now, on the newer model, we can see that we've got a NEM pocket fitted there at the front, and it has this fully sprung center pivot design, which is much closer to what the original locomotives possessed, and it makes the riding of this locomotive much more prototypical. And you will notice this when the locomotive goes round tight curves. The riding and direction that the front pony truck follows looks much more prototypical, and it has to be said it's something that I probably never would have thought about before, but the tradition for front pony trucks going back for decades and decades has been to have them pivot from the back, and it does make the front of the locomotive overhang the track in a very unprototypical way on train set style curves. Now this addresses a lot of that, and it's, well, a change that you might not necessarily realise until it's pointed out, but the ride quality of this locomotive is much improved as a result, and it is an amazing attention to detail. The NEM pocket on the front means that if you wish to fit a front coupling, it is a really easy proposition. If we go to the previous iteration, what we can see is that this has the pivot at the back. As you can see there, I can roll this this front bogie all the way around. You can just about see the screw there at the back, and it means that going around corners, this bogie can come right out, and it doesn't ride as well as the newer version. Whilst I've got it here, I want to show you these front frames, and I'm going to get in close, and you can see very much the difference. On the previous iteration, it's very basic and flat. The overall shape is there, but on the newer one, you can really see that difference. It looks like the proper frame of the model. I can see that the actual thickness of the plastic moulding is much more closer to scale thickness. And that really, once you see it, you can't unsee it. That is so much better. So really, the front end of this locomotive is where an awful lot of the improvement is at. In other areas, going to look at some of the detail along the splashers, along the sole bar there of the locomotive, on the top of the frames. That's all really, really good, really, really fine. When I go to the Duchess of Abercorn here, it's all still there, but there's a slight element, just going to go back and forth. I don't know, it's difficult to tell. I'm going to say that it's probably about the same. There's a lot that Hornby got absolutely correct on the previous version. The cab glazing is a little bit chunky on the older version. Let's just go and check out. And it's much more flush on the newer version. So certainly there's another area where a very visible improvement has taken place. Looking at the frames for the back bogie, these don't actually pivot, and it comes with these flangeless wheels as standard, so it doesn't actually derail. And it does work quite nicely, it has to be said. The previous version also has a similar arrangement, but I'm just looking there, and there seems to be slightly more detail perhaps on the bottom of the firebox. It's hard to tell. Again, I wouldn't like to call it. Now, a final area, this is going to be really difficult for me to show you. Let's have a look in there. Let's see if we can pick this up and just very carefully show you inside the cab. There's a lot of detail going on there. I'm just trying not to scratch these. It is quite a difficult angle. And on the previous version, you can see the inside of the cab is much more basic. So that's another area that in recent years Hornby have certainly taken to heart. And we've seen that in a lot of the newer models, that the inside of the cabs are fully detailed, a lot of separately applied detailing, and they really are bringing that cab backhead to the fore, which really looks something special once you see it. There is a lot to admire on these models, but certainly you can see that whereas at first glance it might be said, well, this doesn't look a lot of difference. Why have they retooled it? But on closer inspection, there is definitely a lot more going on the newer model, and this is a much finer, more refined locomotive with a lot of attention to detail going on, with little fixes like the tender drawbar, and most importantly for me, that front bogie is an all new tooling with a completely new, much more prototypical arrangement to secure it to the locomotive. And when you're watching these locomotives go round the track, it really does make a huge difference. One other feature that is common between these two and must not be overlooked, that both of these have tenders whose internals are perfectly laid out for fitting the TTS sound chip. And I well recommend, as an additional detail to these, if you've gone DCC, that you consider fitting them with the TTS sound. It is a really, really great sound and well worth every penny from this value for money chip from Hornby. I hope this video has been informative to you. It's been great having your company through this voyage of discovery of the venerable Hornby Princess Coronation Class and making this comparison between old versus new. Don't forget to like this video, share it too, and also, if you've not already done so, subscribe to the channel and you'll be the first to know about new videos as and when they go up. Also, don't forget you can head on over to Patreon and help support the channel, make the videos that you want to watch. And you can also pick up copies of my books from Amazon and also through our website, links down below. And if you're fancying getting one of these brilliant locomotives yourself, then check out our affiliate links down below, and that will help you find these locomotives and the sound chips to go in them to expand your own collection. But it's been great having your company, and this is me, Jenny Kirk, saying thanks for watching. It's been great to have your company. You take care of yourself. Bye for now. Today's video has been brought to you in part thanks to the generous donation of my fans on Patreon. And an extra special huge thanks goes out to Anthony Kidson, Michael Churchwood, Bob Threeton, Alec Ralph, Anthony Hunt, William Wade, Wayne Johns, Offshore Allen, and oorail.co.uk. If you'd like to help support the show, head on over to patreon.com/Jennifer Kirk. Thank you. Today's video has been brought to you by my books, Bringing Home the Stars, Twinkle Little Star, and also you can get the complete comic collections of All Over the House, Books 1, Books 2, and also the wacky zany Life of Knob T. Mouse. Thanks, and catch you later.